Good morning. I'm Bonnie Gardner. I'm co-chair of the Public Affairs Forum of the First Unitarian Universalist Church of Austin, 4700 Grover Avenue. Our forums are free and open to the public, and every Sunday at noon. We would welcome your attendance. Today, it's my honor and privilege to introduce Police Chief Art Acevedo, and I'll tell you just a little bit about Chief Acevedo. He's going to be speaking on responsibilities and challenges of policing in one of the nation's largest and most dynamic cities, Austin. Chief Acevedo was born in Cuba, emigrated to the U.S. at 4, and is the first Hispanic to lead the Austin Police Department. He is an honors graduate of University of La Verne in California with a degree in public administration. He worked his way up to the position of Chief California Highway Patrol in 2005, and he came to Austin in 2007. He has held a variety of leadership positions in the Major Cities Chiefs Association and the International Association of Chiefs of Police. And let's give a warm welcome to Chief Art Acevedo.
Thank you, Bonnie. Wow, well, good morning. How's everybody doing this morning? It's great to be here this morning on this wonderfully wet morning that we finally got some moisture just in time for ACL so we can hopefully not ruin the green lawn, but hopefully it'll dry up. I just looked at the weather report. It's going to be in the 90s next week until Friday, then it's going to go to the mid-80s, which will be perfect weather, and hopefully the 90s will dry it up. But this is my third time here, and I was really excited. I saw Nelson Linder, the president of NAACP, and his son Euclid. Give them a big hand here this morning visiting. I think Nelson and I agree about 90% of the times, but the few times that we disagree, it's always very public. But one of the things I think is really important in policing, especially being a police chief, you have to be accessible, you have to be engaged, and you have to really be out in the community. And one of the things that I'm very proud of is that from day one we've always worked together, because it's okay to disagree sometimes. You don't have to, the way I always tell people, if you want a police chief or a mayor or anybody in a leadership position that you want to agree with 100% of the time, then you need to be in that position. Because human nature being what it is, we're never going to agree on everything, and I think life would be pretty vanilla if we did. It'd be kind of boring. And I think the different perspectives is really important. But I've been here now over 6 years, and I got to tell you, I was really excited to hear Bonnie describe Austin, Texas as a big city, because one of the biggest challenges in this city is trying to get people out of the mentality that it is a small college town. We're the 11th largest city in the United States of America. We are the fastest growing city in the United States of America, and we're the fastest growing region in the United States of America. And if we're not very careful and paying attention to the details, we're going to go from one of the safest cities to a city that's not going to be safe, and that's not good for anybody. One of the things that we're going to announce tomorrow I'm very proud of is the fact that we are now the second safest city in the United States as it relates to violent crime. The second safest major American city, which means out of the top 30, we're number 2. And that speaks volumes as to our relationship with the community. It speaks volumes as to the work that we do together in collaboration with one another to keep Austin safe. Now, there's bad news, though. Okay, a major city is defined as a city of 500,000 or more in this country, and there are 30 cities that fit that bill according to the FBI's Uniform Code of Uniform Crime Reporting. So out of 30, we're number 2 in violent crime. That is by design. We focus our limited resources on preventing, responding to, and solving violent crime. I mean, you can always replace a piece of property, but you cannot replace life. You can't restore somebody's ability to walk and talk if they're the victims of an aggravated assault. So we focus, because of our resources, on violent crime. But here's the bad part. Here's the bad news. We're number 20. We were on the bottom of the list, but now we went from 27th worst last year to 26th. So we have made some progress as it relates to property crime. Property crime, I'll never forget last year we were in the council and we were having a presentation and a work section on property, and I started talking about property crimes and how challenging it is for a myriad of reasons. One is the fact that according to the police executive research forum. We're about 300 officers short of where we should be. Two, that's resulted in our patrol officers going from call to call to call, and their uncommitted time, which means the time they have to build relationships, the time they have to get out of the car, the time they have when they see young youth playing in the neighborhood park and just, I used to love on patrol when I had free time. I'd go to a park, I'd get out, and who would I talk to? I'd talk to kids. I'd give them stickers, I'd give them cards, we'd talk about what's going on, how school. Our folks are down to 15% uncommitted time. And when you only have 15% uncommitted time, the national best practice is anywhere from 30 to 35, 40%. You are limited in what you can do. Now, you add to that the fact that when we do arrest them, so we're in this discussion, and I tried to explain that we need additional resources because one of the biggest deterrents to somebody burglarizing your home is a visible police department in police cars doing proactive patrol. It's a police department that has the ability to get out and find out who's living in the neighborhood, talking to the folks. If you don't know what belongs in somebody's neighborhood, you won't know what stands out, if that makes any sense to you all. And one of the members of council said, hey, it's just property. What's the big deal? Well, I don't. For a city that talks about we want to be the best at everything and we're world class, we should be embarrassed, I believe, of being number 27 on 30 relates to property crime. Because here's a challenge. Every time somebody breaks into a home, and the law of statistics being what it is, you're one incident closer to an aggravated assault when you're home and they don't know you're home and you surprise them. You're one step closer to a potential homicide. You're one step closer, one incident closer to being in a sexual assault. And that's what they don't understand. The other piece that really is tough for us is that we can get folks, tie them to 20 burglaries. And guess what they get in Travis County as a consequence? Probation. Well, that person, and the majority of them, people when they think of burglars, when they think of people breaking into homes, think of people of color because of the way that sometimes that we are programmed. And I can tell you, a vast majority of our residential burglars are what? White males that are addicted to drugs. I mean, if you look at our homeless population, a big chunk of it is white males that are addicted to drugs and mental issues. And so that is an issue. That is something that we as a community need to keep an eye on because we should not accept that we're number 28. The other challenge is we're number 2 in terms of violent crime, and it just never ceases to amaze me that we're still able to be that way when we have a city where 3 years ago we were looking for a guy that we called the shotgun bandit. He was going into businesses with a shotgun. He even discharged the firearm, committing aggravated robberies. We catch that man. You know how much he got for, we tied him to 7 aggravated armed robberies. How many years do you think he got in Travis County for that? He got 3 years, got out in a little over 2 years. So he gets out. I think this was this year or last year. I can't remember. I'm getting old, so it's time to remember all the. He gets out, and 2 weeks after he gets out, what did he do? Murder somebody. There's a guy that in any other community for that kind of crime, where you're using violence, should not be given a slap on the wrist. Now, one of the things that I'm excited about that completely agree with our Attorney General is those mid-level offenders, those low-level drug offenders. Prison should be for people that are violent criminals or that will not give up on violating the sanctuary of somebody's home. That's what it should be for, not low-level drug offenders. Those people belong in treatment, but once they start crossing the line and now they start putting people at risk, that's what prison should be for. We've got our priorities all messed up, I think, not just here in this country. The other challenge that I think is very important for you all to be aware of is we have a huge issue in this country with brown kids and black kids, especially boys, dropping out of school. Now, I want you to think about that for a minute because some people, oh, that's just an ethnic thing. They're not smart. Baloney. What it is, and this happens to white kids too, because poverty does not discriminate. It impacts, I think, a lot larger number of people of color, but it does impact white kids too. Here's what happens. Here's why these kids end up dropping out for a couple of reasons. Number one, in the summers when the haves have parents that have the ability to provide them with enrichment programs, to provide them with the things they need so they don't just sit around doing nothing and forgetting everything. Those kids are building upon that year of instruction. That's the haves. What are the have-nots doing? Playing Nintendo all day, they're in the park all day, they're playing all day, and those kids of color fall behind, and the poor kids, because again, it impacts all communities, fall behind every summer. I mean, that's a fact. You can look at it. The other issue that's happened in our community, and I met with Dr. King from UT last week, talking about some of the issues of use of force, some of the issues of the conflict, and how we have this a sad, I think, challenge of young black and brown men dropping out of school. And what I brought up to him is this: I am convinced that we've criminalized childhood in the United States of America in poor schools. And let me explain that to you. Nelson and I think we're about the same, we're kind of the same generation of baby boomers. When we were kids in high school, I got in a fist fight in high school. Some kid named Richard Quintero, I knew him since kindergarten, mentioned my mother in the classroom to me. And you don't mention a Cuban kid's mother. So I punched him. I mean, I'm a kid. I'm a freshman in high school. I punched him right in the face, and we ended up having, and you know how that goes. The teacher broke it up. What did they do to us? You went to the principal's office. You went to your counselor's office. They gave you Saturday detention because they were smart enough not to reward that behavior by giving you, during the week, stay home type of thing. He says, hey, all right, hurt me some more. Now, here's what's happened to our country, especially in poor or schools that are in the inner city, schools that are serving young boys of color. There's been a proliferation of police agencies in schools, police officers in schools. It gives the teachers, instead of them dealing with it as a disciplinary issue, instead of them dealing with it as a youth issue, young men and young girls being kids, what do they do now too often? They call the school police. The school police now says that's a battery, that's an assault. They now write the person up. And now starts the slippery slope of this young person dropping out of school because they've been treated as a criminal instead of a young person that is learning how to get along in life. And what I told Dr. King last week was this: I'm willing to bet $1,000. That tells you, because with my salary, that's all I can afford to lose, and my wife won't talk to me. I'm willing to bet anything that if you look at where the dropout rates were 30 years ago, before you had a proliferation of cops, because this is kind of a newer phenomenon, the last 20, somehow kids throughout history were able to graduate. You look at where was the dropout rate, okay, where was it, and then Bill Clinton and our current vice president had the crime bill, the omnibus crime bill many years ago that established the cops funding. If you remember that, it added 100,000 cops. Well, guess what grew tremendously as a result of those 100,000? School district police. I guarantee you that if they're studying this, they're going to find as we increased the number of police officers in schools, dropout rates went up. I'm willing to bet you $1,000 for anybody that wants to take on that study. And Dr. King's talking about doing it. I don't think it's been done comprehensively. And that is the disservice. I'm not saying we shouldn't have law enforcement in schools, but they should be there for one purpose only: to save lives and to keep people from getting hurt. If they witness a fight, they should break it up, and then they should take it over to the... Unless a kid takes out a knife and stabs somebody. Now, that's a little bit overboard. Does that make sense to you all? And if you look at how that same set of circumstances is being handled in an affluent school, as opposed to a school that's in a socially, economically deprived area, I promise you they're being handled differently. And that's the challenge that we have, because who pays for that conflict later on with this young man or goes down that slippery slope? It's us. It's them. It's their families. But sadly, nobody's talking about that issue in our country. And now I think that it's being talked about, but not to the extent it should be. That is a huge challenge for us. And I bring it up to you all because you have voices, and you need to start, I hope, going out and talking to the school district. Are you looking at this issue? Are you looking to see how kids in some of the other high schools outside, maybe Round Rock High School. Let's go and see how they're being treated there as opposed to Reagan High School. You know, how are the two similarly situated students in terms of facts, how's the discipline being handled? And I promise you, if you look at, especially on a national level, you're going to see a huge, huge issue. Now, I talked about how kids fall behind. And I haven't been beat up too badly yet, but it really irritates me. And I've been talking about, I'm all for arts in the public places. I love it. Because my dear father-in-law, who's sick right now, fighting cancer, is a retired art professor. But life in government is about priorities and setting priorities. We're spending 2% of every capital improvement dollar on arts in public places. Now think about that. My police academy, the Public Safety Academy, they spent $24 million building a new facility or adding a new facility. Now think about what's 2% of $24 million? Who's a mathematician out here? Anybody? 400, over 400,000? Does that sound right to everybody? Huh? 480,000. So I'm out there one day, and I see this tin roof looking thing with some huge holes in it. And I ask my staff, I go, what's that? That's arts in public places. And I said, well, there's holes in there. Well, Chief, if you fly over it and you look down, you'll see the shadow, and the sun hits it right, you'll see the shadow of a police officer and an EMS and a firefighter. Now, I'm here to tell you, when we have challenges with kids that don't have any enrichment programs, there's not enough tutoring programs, there's not enough programs to make kids successful, there's not enough money to, in schools, what are the two subjects that get kids to drop out where they struggle? Math, and somebody just said it, reading. Where if we took some of that type of money and put it in those two subjects, they have very small ratios. You can't do it, because kids aren't dropping out for social studies. But they're dropping out because they don't understand social studies, just can't read. And if we use that money, just 1%, for that, imagine how many kids' lives we can turn around. And for some reason, nobody pays attention. Then when you look at, where's that artist from? Oh, he's from New York. So how did that help our economy? How many of you plan on going to the police academy to look at that? And I've talked about it for 6 years, and nobody listens. You know why? Because they say, oh, that's that crazy chief that's always out in left field somewhere. You know what? I spent 27 years fighting for the safety of our community, and I see what happens when we fail kids. And there's no excuse to spend 2%, especially on stuff that you're not going to see. You're not going to see it. What was the value added to this city by spending almost $500,000 on arts and public places as a police academy? First of all, we don't want it to be a Taj Mahal. They're out there to learn how to save lives. They're out there they're out there to be firefighters. They're out there to get in great shape. They're not out there to go look, oh wow, gee, look at that. Isn't that beautiful? I love that statue over there. And I'm not trying to be facetious, but I'm trying to be real. That when we are asked to give more in taxes, I always talk about, I am not anti-government. I think the government should be as large as it needs to be based on efficiencies. I'm about appropriate government and appropriate uses of our resources. And I'm sorry, but when we have as many challenges as we have in this city, especially with our young people, I think that, from my perspective, don't get rid of arts in public places. But how many starving artists do we have that would love to donate their stuff just to get what? Exposure. Why are you paying for something that we might be able to get for free? You know what I'm saying? It's like, hello, we'll give you the venue. You draw the nice painting, we'll put it up. So I bring that up because, again, nobody's listening to me. And I'm here to tell you, you could do a lot with half of that. Could you imagine how many kids we could have gotten tutoring for, after-school tutoring, with half of that? If we took that, just half of that, 480,000, so we take $240,000. How many hours of tutoring can we afford to pay for kids at Reagan High School? 3-on-1. Think about that. And then what's the economic return we're going to get when those kids graduate and become productive members of society? Because when you drop out of high school, you're 7 to 8 times more likely to end up where? In prison. So let's invest in people. Let's invest in youth that are going to secure our future. Now, the other thing that I want to tell you that's very challenging is this. The council wants to open the trails at night to bicyclists. Hey, I'm all for it. okay? But here's the deal. You set the policy, but there's only one police chief. I'm sorry. I'm not going to tell people, hey, come and use the trails at night, but, oh, by the way, we're not going to police it. You're on your own. Because the day that somebody gets hurt or killed, who are they going to point the finger at? The Austin Police Department. We have a moral obligation. We cannot say to people, we're open for business, but you do so at your own risk. I don't think that's right. So I'm trying to take 9 bodies. We're going to take, remember I said first responders are very important. When you're hiding in your closet, what you want when you dial 911 is for us to get there real quick when somebody's downstairs. We just had one Saturday. One of my wife's hairstylist. She and her lives alone with her daughter. She hears her garage door open. She looks out the window. A guy had broken into her car and got her. So this is a lesson for the wise. Don't leave your garage door open if your car is outside, parked right in front of your house. Lock it in the glove box or bring it in with your keys and just keep it with your keys. Does that make sense to y'all? Imagine being a woman alone with your 12-year-old daughter and you hear that garage door open and you see the guy. She was smart. She made a loud, not called 911, made a loud noise so the guy knew somebody's home. And the guy was he was so brave that my guys got there in about 3 minutes and then, or about 5 minutes, and then they get a call in another house right around the corner where the guy went and broke into another house and we ended up catch him. Thank God crooks aren't all that smart. But here's the deal. I'm operational. I'm operations. Since I got here in 2007, we went from this department that was over budget every year. They ran. Their overtime was over every year. We have not done that a single time of reduced crime every year. We're a data-driven, intelligence-led police department. You make the policy decision, but then you let your subject matter experts, this is my life's work, decide how we're going to police it. But I'm going to give you an analogy what happens when policymakers decide that they know our business. You all remember the first Gulf War? How many remember the first Gulf War, 1991? My brother was in both wars. George Bush made a foreign policy decision. The aggression of the Iraqi regime against the Kuwaiti people will not stand. Policy decision, a line in the sand, and it will not stand. Then what did he do? He went to his generals. He went to General Schwarzkopf, Stormy Norton Schwarzkopf, and he went to one of my favorite generals, Colin Powell, and he said, what do you need to carry out my foreign policy decision? Those generals said, we need 500,000 troops, and we need a coalition of the willing. And what did that policymaker do in George Herbert Walker Bush? He provided 500,000 troops and a coalition of the willing. What was the outcome? The quickest battle, a 100-hour war, the quickest ground battle in the history of American modern warfare. Do you all remember that? 100 hours. Now let's move the clock over up 10 years later. We have the second George Bush. George Bush made a policy decision based on erroneous, or either erroneous or manufactured, depending on what side of that debate you're on. I believe it was erroneous. I would hope it wasn't manufactured by him, but I think it was given bad info. That there was weapons of mass destruction in Iraq, and he made a policy decision. He said, we're going to take out that regime. They went to General Szyczynski. You all remember the General, I hope I'm saying his name, Szyczynski, the Army Chief of Staff. They said, what do you need? General Szyczynski said, we need 350,000 troops, not to win the battle, but to secure the peace. And what did Donald Rumsfeld, who was a mid-level officer in the Navy, do with General Szyczynski when he did that? He fired him. So they went in with 130,000 troops, maybe 150,000, and how did that turn out? A 10-year quagmire where thousands of American lives were lost because a policymaker decided instead of sticking to policy, they were going to get it in operations because, hey, I must know better than you, General Szyczynski, who has dedicated his life to the study of what? Warfare. And here's all I'm going to say to that. There's only one police chief in the city of Austin. I can find another job, but I'm not going to sell people short because a policymaker wants to be in operations. They can find another chief because they keep postponing it. We are not going to police the trails. We're not going to do it. We're not, because we have a moral obligation. And I haven't forgotten history. People that were here when I wasn't here, when the trails used to be open 24 hours a night, why did they close them? crime. If you want to look at the future and learn what's happening and what's going to happen in the future, you should look at what? The past. So if I know our history is that we had a problem with crime in the parks and the trails, why in the world would I want to ignore that history and wait till somebody dies, gets assaulted, gets sexually assaulted, until we say, oh, well, hey, you know what? Yeah, it can happen, so maybe we should put cops. See, because government is reactive, but the Austin Police Department is trying to be what? Proactive. That's why we use intelligence. So that's why we use data to be proactive. You know, every year when we look at data, what happens along the strip, what do we call that? The drag. What happens every year when the kids are back in town for the first couple months? Property crimes go because these kids are, first time out of some little town in the big city. They're at Starbucks and they leave their brand new $3,000 compute laptop that their parents got them right there at the table, and they go inside to use the bathroom, or they turn their back, or they leave the bike, or they buy a cheap lock, or they don't lock it at all. So for the first few weeks of UTV back in school, crime spikes. So what do? We put resources. We use data. We use history to figure it out. Last thing I'm going to say is this. Every time that we do something, I'm a very compassionate person. I hope you figure that out when I'm here being a police chief, arguing for funding for schools and arguing for prioritizing our precious tax dollars, But here's the deal. Last year, we look at data. We had experienced a 63% increase in violent crime downtown. 63% or 67%, right? Just a huge increase. So what would you expect the police department to do? Just let it keep going, or do you expect us to respond? So we respond. We put together an initiative, and we do have the result we knew we'd have. We reduced violent crime by almost 50%. So am I feeling pretty good about my cops at that point? Hey, it's wonderful. And so I go over there to City Hall, and rather than celebrating that we actually reduced violent crime by 50%, what was I questioning about? Are you picking on the homeless? And here's the deal for me. My cops downtown know the majority of the homeless population. Okay, there's a difference between a homeless person that doesn't bother anybody, that goes down and gets the bottles out of the trash, and then they go and recycle them, don't harass people, don't try to sell dope, and that criminal transient that is doing what? Stabbing people, selling dope, doing all these things. There's a huge difference. And we don't care about socioeconomic standing. But whether you're homeless or housed, you must obey the what? The law. Period. We target behavior. You will, if you don't believe me, watch my cops downtown. They walk past whom all the time? Who do they walk past all the time and leave them alone? Homeless people. But right now we have an undercover initiative where we have a female cop, acting all, just really low-key and like this. And within 5 seconds, what happens downtown? Aggressive. Well, I think we're videotaping them. They'll stand right in front of her, not even let them go around. Oh, no, you got to get me money. Just right in the face. I'm sorry, but that's not appropriate behavior. We don't target socioeconomic standing. We target behavior. And being homeless or transient is not a pass. Doesn't mean you don't get to play by the rules. And I'm sorry, I'm not going to apologize for that. Because the people in this city, whether you're downtown, the east side, north, Rumberg, wherever, everybody deserves to have a good quality of life. And I told you that one time I came here, when I first got here, when we're trying to really impact the street level narcotics in East Austin, where we get called, and it's all people of color that live there in these neighborhoods, are saying, do something, APD, do something. And I'll never forget when a judge told me, why are you picking on those people with the 5 rocks of controlled substance or the dope? And my response was, because the people living in those areas, their children deserve to be able to go to the park, to a little store, to their friend's house without being accosted by street-level narcotics dealers, and pimps or whatever else may be out there. And guess where most of the people that are buying the dope are coming from? Do you guys remember what I told you? Was anybody here when I talked about this? And I said, most of them are coming from what neighborhood? Which schools have the biggest drug problems in society, no matter what city you're at? The affluent school or the poor school? I'm talking about the drug users. Who is it? The affluent schools. The affluent schools. If you don't think that Westlake High School has a big drug problem, my kids went to Bonita High School in Laverne. There was more dope there than you can shake a stick at. But you know what? The people in those poor areas, they have a right to not have their kids bothered, or then when the gangbangers that sell it end up trying to have a street war about turf, and that one kid crossing the street is not even a target, ends up getting shot. That kid deserves to have a quality of life where he doesn't have to worry about being caught in the crossfire. And that's why we take on those people. So with that, I want to tell you that this job, I've been here for over 6 years. I love Austin, Texas. You saw yesterday that we lost an officer, unfortunately, use of force. I will tell you, and we've talked about this, Nelson and I, sometimes we won't agree on use of force, but I will tell you this, that I always act with a pure heart. My cops know one thing about me is that they may not agree with me, but I dare them to tell me I don't care about them or this community. I dare them. Because the truth is, whether you agree or disagree, it's hard to say we don't care. We do care, and we are really honored and privileged to serve all of you. And I just want to say thank you for having me this morning, and I'll open it up to questions.
Thank you, Chief. Since I have the microphone, I'm going to take the rare liberty of asking the first question here. A lot of people with mental illness and substance abuse are going to behave in inappropriate ways, be aggressive, agitated, belligerent. What is APD currently doing to train the police in handling people with mental illness?
That's a great question. One of the things that we did last year is if we get a call where we know that somebody is actually having a psychotic, what I call is a psychotic emergency, psychological emergency, we don't respond anymore like we used to with just 2 guys, 2 officers. We now require 4 officers, a supervisor, and less lethal force, and a mental health officer, CIT officer to respond. Now, that is the policy. Now, if it's an emergency and you don't have the resources available, you'll be stuck. But dispatch, the policy says you will go in whatever area around, surrounding area, to respond with that. And then we train them on how we do what's called a takedown with those 4 officers. It's a lot safer for the suspect and for the officers if you take them down with 4 officers. And all you simply do, it's kind of like that transient the other day that was at Eddie V's, and I was really embarrassed that the media read the affidavit and put it in the media. But I knew that when that guy went to kick me and push me, I knew that the faster I got him to the ground and pinned him on the ground, that means he doesn't get hurt and I don't get hurt. And I'm a big fat guy, so once I had him on his belly, he wasn't getting up. But we've actually changed our response protocol on that. And that was part of the conversation that Nelson and I had, including our consent searches. We've done so much in the last few years, it's not even funny. It's really, I think we lead the nation in a lot of our policies and procedures and training. Yes. Well, I'm not going to call anybody. That's the boss there.
Richard Halpin.
Thank you, Bonnie. Thank you for doing this great forum. Chief, even before you got here, we've had terrible problems with people of color particularly being shot.
Yeah.
We still have a problem with people of color particularly being shot, and people of all colors seem to get shot, but certainly out of proportion for people of color. And I just wonder what you think the problem is and what you're doing about it in order to stop this terrible violence against the people in our community.
I think that's a really good question. I think, first of all, it's about perspective. You got to look at one shooting and one bad shooting is one shooting too many. I mean, I just believe that in my heart of hearts. And regardless of what, and Nelson doesn't do this, but there's a couple of the activists just lie on TV all the time. He never fires anybody for use of force. It's a lie. The guy just fired yesterday, I think, is the 5th person, for use of deadly force. I fired a lady last year for 1 slap to a lady that spit on her. Then I fired the young kid that pulled her off for lying and covering for her. We are now training more than any other department. We are now training monthly on use of force. We're using force-on-force training with ammunitions. We're using tactical training. We set the standard for Texas. Nobody else in Texas is doing that. But despite that, are we going to have, there's no magic pill, I think, that will say you're going to have 100% success and you're not going to have issues. I mean, Friday was a prime example. All you can do as a police department is train and hold people accountable, and most importantly, try to hire the right people. But also, that's about perspective. You got to look at, if you haven't been policed by a department that's really out of control, you will never appreciate the excellence. And one of the things that I do love about our critics is that they keep us on our toe, and they're always pushing us to do what? Be better. But I tell you that despite the fact that we have those issues where we fall short, we use deadly force a fraction of the time. If you look at any kind of force, it's like 0.2% of total contacts, and that's in our use of force data. We average about 6 officer-involved shootings a year. And what I told one of the other activists, it wasn't with Nelson, it was Jim, is that I'm not going to get caught up in the numbers. I'm going to get caught up and put my focus on the appropriateness. When we have a use of deadly force, our folks know that it is we hold them accountable. And that's really what we have to do, what I think the law demands, and I think that's what this community demands, and we're going to continue to do that. But on a national level, we use deadly force 50% less than the rest of the country. And that's something that, now if you don't think we're tough on crime, on our cops, on deadly force, I want you to follow a case. You got to remember the Jeffrey Dahmer case, Christopher Dahmer in California. Okay? He believes he was mistreated and fired wrongfully by LAPD. He goes out and he murders a couple of people. You know what I'm talking about? This is about, 6 months ago now? So the police department puts officers at the homes, in the vicinity of the homes of potential targets, right? And there's this little Mexican woman and her daughter about 5:30 in the morning delivering the paper. Got the 4-way flashers on. They're stopping at driveway to driveway. Now, if I see that as a police officer at 5:30 in the morning, I'm thinking, hey, somebody's delivering the paper or one of those flyers. Okay, that's a clue, right? Driveway to driveway. Well, what happened with that department? They shot them both. Oh my God, it's a blue pickup truck with the 4-way. It didn't even match the description of Mr. Dahmer's car. Follow that case. What do you think that if my guys did that here, I guarantee you, I think I could ask Nelson, I think you know what would happen to those guys. They wouldn't survive. I promise you, if you look at that, there won't be any discipline. It will be very minor, if any. Watch that case. Because again, life's about protection. Now, the way that you guarantee, the most effective way to avoid the conflict is to do the things we're talking about. Let's not criminalize childhood. Let's put resources into helping kids graduate from high school. Because there is a common denominator in terms of the kids that end up dropping out, they end up getting in criminal activity. And then, like I go to midnight basketball. I tell these young black guys that are in their early 20s, the early 30s. I go, hey, are there racist cops? Yeah, they all raise their hands. Are there bad cops? Yeah, they're cops that probably shouldn't be cops. They all raise their hands. I go, then please, whatever you do, don't ever give them an opportunity to hurt you. Don't do it. And I know I get beat up by members of the community for saying that, but I care enough about our young men, whether they're black or white or brown, to tell them. That's what I tell my own kids. I'm a cop, and when the cops stop me, the few times I've been stopped, if it's nighttime, my dome light goes on, my hands go on the steering wheel, because I know there's some nervous Nellies out there. And if you die, nobody's going to ever be able to bring you back. No matter if there's a lawsuit, nobody's ever going to bring you back. So I tell my kids, I don't care what you've done. I don't care how scared you are. You just do whatever they say. And if they've done you wrong, Dad will take care of it. We'll use the courts. And the way that we do that, and really the best effective, is giving opportunities to kids so they don't turn to those kind of issues. They end up with bad outcomes, especially if you have a questionable cop out there. And they're out there, believe me.
I have a question, but also a compliment. I live in the neighborhood between Runberg and Breaker and I-35 and Cameron Road. And we are newly in the city as about 5 years ago. And we watch out for each other there. And on Friday afternoon, I looked out my front window, and there were 4 police cars right there. My neighbor had called the police because there was a car of 3 young men in it who were casing our neighborhood. And they actually got out of the car and went to across the street in back of that house that is abandoned right now. Anyway, they were there in lickety-split time, and I'll bet those kids are not going to come back to this neighborhood because they know we are watching out.
Yeah.
Now, the city has installed the large cameras in the area of Runberg and Middle Fiskville. And I come down Middle Fiskville many, many times to the Runberg stoplight. I always have my car doors locked. But I'm wondering, has there been a large drop in the number of prostitution and drug cases that have happened in the neighborhood? We have a neighbor's night out on Tuesday night in our neighborhood, and I'm just curious that I can
Great.
say.
Thank you for doing that. National Night Out Tuesday. Thank you. Typically, where you put public safety cameras, you do see a reduction of crime. Some will say it displaces it. From my perspective, if we could have enough cameras to displace crime out of our city to some other city, maybe up to Georgetown or something, I'm okay with that. But it does typically, it does reduce crime. More importantly, it works as a deterrent. But secondly, it's a tremendous investigative tool. You know, downtown we have a lot of conflict with all the drunks every night. We've actually been able to solve some really, really serious crimes with those public safety cameras. And I'm really proud of that. And remember, Stan and me tried to get them going before I ever got here, and they just didn't get it done. And I'm proud of the fact that we got it done. If you've never been to our real-time crime center and had a tour of our department, please come out and check it out so you can see how that works. It is a tremendous tool, and it is helping.
I know there's a revenue-sharing plan which goes on in this state, and that certain funds are earmarked for certain purposes. Some of the money goes to mentally ill people. Some of the money goes to teachers and schools. Some of the money goes for highways and highway funds. That's how we had 130 built so far east of town that it's still not used very well, while I-35 and others are horribly abused right now. And I'm wondering about police. Do police get a share of that fund, or is police money being disappeared by going to other sources? Thank you.
Talking about state funds that come in, highway tolls, we don't really get any of that funding because that goes back to the toll authority, and the toll authorities have actually contracted for enforcement with DPS and some of the constables and some of the other agencies. We are not patrolling any of the tollways.
My name is Fred Higgins, and I don't know you personally, but for the last 6 years I've read the news and I've listened to you speak on occasions like this, and I'm very impressed by your what I think is genuine candor, and I like what you said about immigration at one time. I wonder if you could reiterate what your position. For example, I'm relating that to your telling the council you don't want to have to be responsible for policing the trail at night. No. You also didn't want to be responsible for being the federal ICE, I guess.
Yeah, that's an unfunded mandate, and whether you like it or not, if we snapped our finger and 15 million illegal immigrants disappeared overnight, our economy would probably take trust me when I say our economy would take a huge hit. I don't like hypocrisy. And I'll tell you this right now. Do you remember last session? We started the session with a press conference that illegal immigrants are destroying the state of Texas. We introduced dozens and dozens and dozens of bills that are anti-immigrant bills. How many passed? Basically 0. Then we had a press conference where we needed an emergency session of the legislature to deal with this scourge of illegal immigration. How many really passed in that? 0. Who controls the governor's mansion? R, D, or I? Or G, or whatever other parties, or L, or whatever. What is it? R. Lieutenant Governor, R. Speaker of the House, R. Supermajority Party in the Senate, R. Almost supermajority party in the House of Representatives, R. How many bills passed? 0. And why? Because on balance, immigration, illegal or otherwise, is good for what? The economy. It's all about dollars. We don't have the resources to be an agent for the federal government to do their job. I don't have enough personnel, it takes me on average, when we do a hotshot call, which means somebody's life is at risk. It is a violent crime in process. It's a crime against a person in progress. It takes us on average about 7 minutes to get there. Now, that's the average. A lot of times we're quicker, sometimes we're slower. But that's 7 minutes when you're in fear for your life is an eternity. And now they want me to use my precious resource. I'm sorry. I don't care about the emotion of the debate. I care about the outcomes of the policy. And the outcome of the policy of using our limited resources is that we pay the price. Not to mention the fact that we need to build the trust. My job is public safety. It's not immigration. I need those immigrants, whether legal or otherwise, that are here. I need their cooperation to break up the human trafficking ring, the sex trafficking ring, the drug trafficking ring. Because the guy that's victimizing that illegal immigrant today may be victimizing you or your family tomorrow. And so when you move the emotion from that debate, it's hard to argue that local police should be involved in that policing. And I don't know of any major city police chief. And the funny thing is, I'm a center-right guy in my personal life. And so if you see this position, here's what conservative or real extreme right people say. Oh, he's just some crazy liberal Democrat. Oh, no. I'm a center-right guy, and on some issues I'm a little bit to the left. But I'm pretty much a moderate guy. That's why people, hey, you should run for office. Are you kidding me? I'm too moderate. We've been hijacked. Our political system has been hijacked by the extremes on both ends of it, and that's the problem with our country right now. And that's why you'll never see me as an elected office.
I want to first thank the church for this kind of forum. It's a great thing for me. I've been here for years now, and I'm always educated and inspired by what you do here. To our chief, I want to sort of give you an analogy. My son is 12 years old. And during my generation, we saw the police, we went the other direction. We were just not comfortable having a conversation. So I would say, with your outreach, at least these kids now know that you can be approached, you can have a conversation, and that's worth literally millions and millions of dollars. Because the more they see you, where you're approachable and they have conversations, the less fear they deal with in terms of social policies. Here's the other thing, and I'll just say this for the public record. Unfortunately, when there's a race shooting in the city, it gets a lot of attention, and it needs to when it's unnecessary. But I always tell people in my community as well, there are all kinds of threats out there. And when you quantify those threats, the chances you've been shot by police officers is minimal due to the other kinds of threats. There's a balance to this conversation that we can't seem to get to. I'm a black man, and I always tell people, you're entitled to your opinions, not your own facts. And here's the good news. Here's the good news, and I say this and I get a lot of criticism for it. In my opinion, this is the most accessible, one of the most informed police officers in the country. You very seldom see police officers in the NACP in the same room having the same kind of conversation. But his comments are about social policy. It's about investments. And we need more politicians doing the same thing. Unfortunately, he's not one, but at the same time, when he talks about dropouts, I've been doing this for a long time now. When I think about Sophia King or Jesse Owens or Daniel Roker or Michael Clark or Kevin Brown or Nate Sanders or Byron Sanders or Larry Jackson Jr., all those kids had issues at school, and they dropped out. In these communities, there is less opportunities. We don't invest in these schools or even jobs. So if we had enough wisdom to invest in these circumstances, we could stop a lot of this stuff. So back to his point, if these kids had more opportunities where they were safe and sound, and they met each other and got jobs and training, we wouldn't be having this kind of conversation. But unfortunately, this issue has become politicized on both sides. My goal is to ensure, first of all, that he's treated properly, because when we have these conversations, it's too easy to attack everybody, even myself sometimes, and especially police officers. When you take that off and peel that onion back, there are a lot of truths there we have to address. And I believe that if a police officer can communicate, can travel, and go out in the community and talk to these kids one-on-one, that's going to take us a long way. But let's be honest about this. These are historical, almost finished. These are long-term historical problems. So if you invest in these solutions and give a little time, you're going to probably get a good result, but it's going to take a little time. Thank you very much.
Hi, I'm Helen LaFleur. I've been struck by the comments about the youth at risk and your earlier comments about the summer vulnerability. What specifically should we be putting in place in terms of summer programs, and what could we as volunteers do to assist that?
What can volunteers do?
Yeah. What programs are needed to really, make a difference for these kids, and then what can volunteers
Absolutely.
do?
I think the more kids that we have in extensive camps in the summer where they're learning and where they're participating in positive activities, the greater our chances for success. You know, I see a lot of people in here that are like me, baby boomers, and you may be retired. You know how you can leave an impact and have an everlasting impact in this community? Is to volunteer. Go to Austin's Partners in Education and be a mentor, be a classroom coach. If we had as many retirees as we have, we're an aging population here in Austin. We're young, but we still have a lot of people that are baby boomers like I am. If we had people do that, that in of itself could have a tremendous impact. So if you have time this summer, contact Parks and Rec, contact AISD, see what they have available for you to be able to volunteer to help out. But I really believe, again, is that it's about prioritizing our limited tax dollars. Do we need to spend $400,000 on art in the police academy, or do we need to spend $400,000 on tutors for kids, or after-school programs for kids, or weekend programs on Saturday for kids, or summer programs? That's my perspective. I think we need to really be smart in how we spend our tax dollars and prioritize them properly.
Hi, I'm Glenn Williams. We had at the Pride Festival, the church had a booth, and we were right next to APD. And APD the two officers were fantastic. Didn't matter how flamboyant somebody was, they treated them all with respect. However, I've been a legal advisor both here and for other departments, and I know that there can be a disparity between the recruiters, those people meeting the public, and that officer on patrol, late at night. And particularly if somebody does not give the proper respect, there could be overreaction, be either racially motivated, homophobically related. What do you do at APD to try to keep that from happening?
Well, first of all, we hold people to very high standards. I always tell people, I always talk about diversity with my cops. And diversity is a four-letter word to some folks. To me, diversity means religion, it means race, it means ethnicity, it means diversity of thought. And I tell them is that if we're not reflective of the community we serve and respectful of the community we serve, we're not going to be successful. And now the biggest mistake that we have made in terms of these issues over the years, we've always told people, treat people the way what? That's a mistake. We're wrong. You're wrong. Get that out of your system. If you truly value diversity and you value differences and you're respectful of those differences, you should take the time to learn about people so you can treat them to the best of your ability the way they want to be treated. Does that make sense to you all? We've gotten that wrong. We grew up with a bad... So what we do is we have an immersion program, academy. We go to all the different communities. Cadets spend an entire week and have to then come back to the command staff, the executive staff, make a presentation on the black community, the elderly, the gay, lesbian, transgender community. You name the community, we actually are very... The bottom line is this. Since I've been here, external complaints are down. Internal complaints, which means the ones that we initiate, that our officers initiate, that our command staff initiate, are up. Dismissals of officers in the last 10 years, this was a little over a year ago, who's fired the most officers? I'm not bragging about that, but it talks about criminality. Now, Pastor Joe Parker asked me when I was flirting with going to Dallas, and thank God I didn't go. He asked me, Chief, what's going to be your legacy? And I called him the other day because I know what it is now. When I got here in 2007, I fired a guy by the name of, his name doesn't matter. It's a sergeant who shot Kevin Brown. Kevin Brown was armed. He was armed. But being in possession of a firearm unlawfully is in most places a misdemeanor. Right? If you just have it on your person. Kevin Brown runs away. My guy chases him. Now, most of the time when bad guys are running away, what is the only thing they're trying to do? Escape. Now, you got to be careful because we had a Houston officer that went in foot pursuit, and a guy went around the corner, and as he came around the corner, he murdered him. But he's trying to escape. So Kevin Brown chucks the firearm, right? Throws it down, runs into a courtyard. My guy shoots him twice in the back, and when he's on the ground, and Kevin Brown's asking, please don't let me die, what does he do? Shoot 2 more times. He missed both of those shots. To me, firing him was a no-brainer, especially when I asked him in a disciplinary hearing, Hey, now that you know that when you shot that young man, he was unarmed, is there anything that you would do differently? You know, hindsight being 20/20. Is there anything you do differently? You know what he says? If I have to slow down, Chief, I might as well not be a cop. And I thought to myself, well, thank you very much. This hearing's over. You made my life very easy. And we fired him. The brouhaha in the department. Oh, my goodness. I had spent a week going to roll calls to try to explain to the cops why you would fire somebody that shot somebody twice in the back and while he's on the ground, instead of just slicing the pie, which means get away from so he can't shoot you. Just cover him until help gets there. Since that time, now when we fire officers for stuff that is legitimate use of force, you know what I hear from the cops? They get it. With the exception of a couple of union guys, including the president. They get it. We just fired that officer Friday. I mean, that's just a traffic stop, for goodness sake. I've had people jump out on me 1,000,000 times in my career. And if I think they might be armed, I might just put my gun out. You won't even know it's out. I'm right here behind my door saying, hey, sir, pardon me, can you get over here? Can you do this? Not, boom. You know what the cops are saying? We get paid to take calculated risks. And if your gun's already out, right, and the guy, has anybody seen the video? I can see he's holding it like this, the wallet. How many people hold a gun like this with the palm up? I can't really tell it's a wallet, but we know what I can tell. It's not a gun. And as a police officer, what I do and what I'm proud of my cops for, those few uses of force, there are thousands of times throughout the year that they could, under state law and under policy, deploy deadly force, but guess what they do? And this is what I think makes them heroes. They hesitate that fraction of a second out of respect for the sanctity of life. But does that make the news? And so a couple of my commanders went to talk to the commander of that station where the guy got fired, went and talked, and the 9-year veteran said, you know what? It's furtive. You know, you shouldn't be going into your pockets. You shouldn't be, and if you see the video, he's doing this. He's putting his cell phone down. It's furtive. But this is a 9-year veteran, tells the rest of the guys from the commander. But what I do in situations like that, I wait till I identify the actual threat. Now that would have been at the end of a pursuit. You're chasing a bank robber. That's a different, maybe, but come on. So that is the legacy that the cops get it. I fired this young lady for slapping a woman once who spit in her face. The cops get it because she lied on the report. If you lie, here's what happens in organizations. Do we all set the bar high, yes or no? Every organization? But we don't enforce the standards. We do, and our cops, not only do they get it, they appreciate it, and they value the fact that they're in a department that holds people to high standards. They take a lot of great pride in that. And that's, I think, my goal in doing my legacy.
Thank you for a wonderful presentation.
Thank you.